The small coastal town of Pine Harbor wasn't the kind of place that raised billionaires. It was the kind of place where people knew your name at the grocery store, where summer festivals featured the same food stands year after year, and where most folks were happy with a simple life by the sea. This was where Maya Chen had grown up, in a blue two-bedroom house 3 blocks from the ocean. Maya had never dreamed of a fancy life. Even as a little girl, she'd been practical. While other kids wanted to be movie stars or astronauts, Maya just wanted to be happy. Her mom had taught her to sew her own clothes, and her dad had shown her how to fix just about anything rather than buying new. Use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. That was what Grandma Chen always said, and Maya took it to heart. By the time Maya turned 22, she was working at the Salty Dog coffee shop and taking night classes at the community college. She loved the smell of coffee beans and the rhythm of the morning rush. The fishermen coming in before dawn, the office workers grabbing lattes on their way to the small businesses along Main Street, and the retirees who lingered over chess games until noon. That's where she met Daniel Way, though she didn't know who he was at the time. She just knew he was the quiet guy who came in every morning at 7:15 for a black coffee and sometimes a blueberry muffin. He always said please and thank you, left a generous tip, and didn't stare at his phone the whole time like many customers did. "You're new around here," Maya had said one morning, sliding his coffee across the counter. "Just in town for a few months," he'd replied with a smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Working on a project." Maya had no idea that project was worth millions of dollars. A new tech platform Daniel was developing at a rented beach house because he needed peace and quiet away from Silicon Valley. She had no idea he could have bought the entire coffee shop and the building it sat in without blinking an eye. She just knew he was easy to talk to. 3 months of morning coffees turned into evening walks on the beach. Evening walks turned into weekend drives along the coast. By the time fall arrived, Maya realized she'd fallen in love with the man in the plain button-down shirts who listened like what she said really mattered. When Daniel finally told her about his company and his success, they were sitting on a driftwood log watching the sunset. "I should have told you sooner," he said, looking nervous for the first time since she'd met him. But with most people, once they know, everything changes. Maya had been shocked, of course, but after thinking about it for a minute, she'd shrugged and said, Well, you still put your pants on one leg at a time, don't you?" That was the moment Daniel knew she was the one. They married the following spring in a small ceremony at Pine Harbor Community Park. Maya wore her mother's dress, slightly altered to fit her smaller frame. Daniel's business partners flew in on private jets but seemed charmed by the homemade cake and string lights in the trees. The local newspaper ran a small story about the local girl who married a tech mogul, but the excitement died down quickly in a town where catching the biggest fish of the season got more attention than money ever would. Maya had worried things might change after they got married, that Daniel might expect her to suddenly become someone different, someone who cared about designer clothes and fancy jewelry. But he never did. "I fell in love with you, not with some idea of who you could be," he told her one night when she brought it up. And so, even after moving to Daniel's home in the city, Maya stayed true to herself. She still drove her old blue Honda that had been a college graduation gift from her parents. She still bought her clothes from regular department stores and sometimes the thrift shop down the street. She still cut coupons out of habit, even though they had more money than she could wrap her head around. The only real change was that Maya had quit her barista job to run the Way Foundation, a charity Daniel had set up in both their names to help kids from small towns get college scholarships and start their own businesses. It had been Maya's idea, and with her small-town sensibility and Daniel's resources, they were making a real difference in hundreds of lives. Their home wasn't what you'd expect from a billionaire either. It was big, yes, a beautiful house, overlooking the bay, but it wasn't flashy. Maya had decorated it with comfortable furniture and lots of books. There were handmade quilts on the beds and family photos on the walls. The kitchen was where they spent most of their time, cooking together while listening to old records. On weekends, they'd often drive back to Pine Harbor to visit Maya's parents. Daniel would help her dad fix things around the house while Maya and her mom cooked Sunday dinner. Sometimes they'd stay overnight in Maya's old bedroom, which her mom had kept exactly the same, complete with the science fair ribbons and beach photos stuck to the mirror. "You don't have to do this, you know," Maya said one Sunday as they drove back to the city. "We could just fly them out to visit us." "I like going there," Daniel said simply. "It reminds me of what's real." That was the thing about Daniel. For all his success, he valued the same things Maya did. Maybe that's why they work so well together. In a world that was always chasing the next big thing, they both appreciated the small moments. Morning coffee on the porch, walks along the beach at sunset, game nights with the few close friends they'd made. Of course, not everyone understood their way of life. Daniel's business associates often seemed confused by Maya's lack of interest in status symbols. The wives of Daniel's colleagues would invite her to fancy lunches and shopping trips, and Maya would go sometimes to be polite. But she never quite fit in with their conversations about vacation homes and private school drama. "Don't you want to update your look, dear?" One woman had asked during a charity gala, eyeing Maya's simple black dress that she'd worn to at least 3 events before. "I know the most marvelous stylist who could help you." Maya had just smiled and said, "I'm pretty comfortable with who I am, but thank you." Later that night, Daniel had found her on the balcony of the event hall, taking a break from the crowd. "Having fun?" he'd asked, loosening his tie as he joined her. "It's not really my scene," Maya admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm embarrassing you by not being more, I don't know, sophisticated." Daniel had laughed at that, a genuine laugh that echoed in the night air. "Maya, those people in there spend their whole lives trying to impress each other with things that don't matter. You're the most real person I know. That's not embarrassing, it's refreshing." And so they'd built their life together on their own terms, finding a balance between Daniel's world of business meetings and investor calls and the simple values that kept them grounded. They donated to causes they believed in, spent time with people who didn't care about their bank account, and tried to make a difference in ways that mattered. Maya still marveled sometimes at how her life had turned out. On paper, she and Daniel shouldn't have made sense. The small-town barista and the tech billionaire. But in reality, they were just 2 people who'd found something genuine in a world that often felt anything but. What Maya didn't realize was that her simple approach to life, the very thing that had drawn Daniel to her, would soon put her in an uncomfortable spotlight. And Daniel's reaction would remind everyone, including Maya herself, of why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Maya had circled the block 3 times before finding the courage to park her old Honda. The gleaming storefront of Bellamy's. Fine jewelry and watches stood out among the high-end shops lining this particular stretch of downtown. Unlike the friendly storefronts of Pine Harbor with their hand-painted signs and window displays arranged by the owners themselves, this place seemed designed to intimidate. Daniel's birthday was coming up next week, and Maya wanted to get him something special. Not because he expected it. Daniel was the kind of man who genuinely meant it when he said, "Don't get me anything," but because she wanted to surprise him for once. In their 5 years of marriage, he'd given her so much and asked for so little. In return, he needs a decent watch, Maya's sister Lily had suggested during their weekly phone call. Something that won't embarrass him in those big meetings. It was true that Daniel still wore the same sturdy, unremarkable watch he'd had since college. Like Maya, he didn't care much for flashy things, but she'd noticed him admiring a colleague's vintage timepiece at a recent company dinner. Maybe, she thought, there was a middle ground, something special but not showy. Maya checked her reflection in the car mirror before getting out. She'd put on her nice jeans today, dark blue with no worn spots, and a simple green sweater that Daniel once said brought out the flecks of gold in her eyes. Her straight black hair was pulled back in her usual ponytail, and she wore the small pearl earrings that had been her grandmother's. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the sidewalk, clutching her practical leather purse a little tighter than necessary. Through the windows of Bellamy's, she could see sparkling display cases and people dressed like they'd walked straight out of a magazine. "You belong here just as much as anyone," Maya whispered to herself, a pep talk she'd learned to give in situations like this. "You're just buying a birthday gift, that's all." The heavy glass door made a soft whooshing sound as she pushed it open. Instantly, She was enveloped in the store's carefully crafted atmosphere. Subtle lighting designed to make everything sparkle, the faint scent of something expensive in the air, and music playing just loudly enough to ensure conversations remained private, but not so loud that it distracted from the merchandise. A young woman behind the nearest counter glanced up, her eyes making a quick assessment of Maya before returning to the couple she was helping. A man in a tailored suit, and a woman with hair so perfectly styled it didn't move when she nodded. Maya wandered toward the watch displays, trying to appear confident as she bent to examine the offerings behind the glass. The prices weren't displayed, which she knew was never a good sign for her budget. But this wasn't about her budget. Daniel's company had just been valued at $12 billion. She reminded herself that she was the wife of the founder, not just Maya Chen from Pine Harbor. "May I help you find something?" a voice finally asked after she'd been looking for nearly 10 minutes. Maya straightened to find a man in his 50s standing on the other side of the display case. His name tag read, Philip Harrington, manager. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes, please," Maya said, relieved to finally be acknowledged. "I'm looking for a watch for my husband's birthday. Something special, but not too flashy. He's not really into showing off." Philip's smile remained fixed. "I see. And what sort of budget did you have in mind today?" Maya hesitated. She'd never gone shopping without a specific budget in mind. It was against everything she'd been raised to believe in. But she also knew from experience that in places like this, naming a number too low could close doors. "I'm flexible on the price," she said carefully. "It's an important birthday." Philip's eyebrows rose slightly. "Well, our timepieces start at around $15,000 for the basic models. The truly special pieces," he gestured toward a separate display, "those begin at around $50,000. Maya tried not to let her shock show on her face. She could buy a nice car for that amount. Still, she nodded as if considering this perfectly reasonable. "Could I see that one?" she asked, pointing to a watch with a clean design and a rich brown leather strap. It looked like something Daniel might actually wear. Philip hesitated, and Maya noticed his eyes travel from her face to her simple clothes, her practical shoes, and her well-loved purse. "That particular piece is $62,000, he said, his voice a touch louder than before. A couple nearby glanced over. "That's fine," Maya said, though her heart was racing a bit. It was more than she'd planned to spend, but Daniel was worth it. And it wasn't as if they couldn't afford it. Philip still didn't move to retrieve the watch. Instead, he cleared his throat and leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Perhaps I could suggest somewhere more suitable? There's a lovely department store just 3 blocks down that carries some very nice watches in a more accessible price range." Maya blinked, not quite processing what was happening. "I'm sorry. It's just that Bellamy's caters to a certain clientele," Philip continued, his smile now strained. "Our pieces are investments, really. Collector's items. I wouldn't want you to feel out of your depth." A flush crept up Maya's neck as she realized what he was saying. He thought she couldn't afford to shop here. He was trying to get rid of her. "I'd still like to see the watch, please," she said, her voice quieter but firm. Philip sighed almost imperceptibly. "I understand wanting to dream a little, but I do have serious customers waiting." He nodded toward a couple being helped by another associate. "Perhaps another day, when you're ready to make a purchase of this caliber." By now, other customers were watching the exchange with barely concealed interest. Maya felt her face burning with embarrassment. She'd faced subtle snobbery before when accompanying Daniel to business functions, but never something this blatant. I'm ready to make a purchase," she insisted, though her voice shook slightly. "I'd just like to see the watch first." Philip's professional veneer slipped further. "Look," he said, no longer bothering to keep his voice down. "These aren't the sort of pieces one buys on a whim. Our clients typically have accounts with us. They're established customers who understand the value of what we sell. I'm trying to save you the embarrassment of getting in over your head." A well-dressed woman at a nearby counter whispered something to her companion, and they both smirked. Maya felt as if the floor might swallow her up. "I'm not going to waste any more of your time then," she said, summoning what dignity she could. "Thank you for your assistance." "The department store I mentioned is called Harmon's," Philip called after her as she turned to leave. "They'll have something in your budget, I'm sure." Maya pushed through the door and hurried down the sidewalk, blinking back tears of humiliation. She made it to her car before the first tear fell, sliding down her cheek as she fumbled with her keys. "This is ridiculous," she told herself, wiping the tear away roughly. "You have nothing to be ashamed of." Yet the shame clung to her anyway, not because she couldn't afford the watch. She could have bought the entire display case if she'd wanted to, but because for a few minutes in there, she'd felt like that shy girl from Pine Harbor again, the one who didn't belong in fancy places, with fancy people. Maya drove home in silence, the embarrassment gradually giving way to anger, then disappointment, and finally a kind of sad resignation. She'd call Daniel's assistant tomorrow and ask for help ordering something online instead. She wouldn't tell Daniel about what had happened. He'd only be upset, and his birthday shouldn't be spoiled by something so petty. What Maya didn't realize as she pulled into their driveway was that the incident at Bellamy's wouldn't stay a secret for long. And when Daniel found out, his reaction would surprise not just the people at the jewelry store, but Maya herself. 3 days after the incident at Bellamy's, Maya was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner when her phone rang. Her sister Lily's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, Lil," Maya answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued slicing a bell pepper. "So did you end up getting him that watch?" Lily asked without preamble. She'd never been one for small talk. Maya's knife paused, mid-slice. She hadn't told anyone about what happened at the jewelry store, not even Lily. She'd spent the last few days browsing online instead, finally ordering a vintage watch from a reputable dealer. It wasn't as special as she'd hoped, but it would arrive in time for Daniel's birthday. "I found something online," Maya said carefully. "Why do you ask?" "Just wondering. Did you try that fancy place downtown? Bellamy's or whatever it's called?" Something in her sister's tone made Maya suspicious. "Lily, what's going on?" "Nothing. I was just curious if you went there, that's all." Maya sighed. Her sister was a terrible liar. "Yes, I went. No, I didn't buy anything. Now tell me why you're really asking." There was a long pause before Lily responded. "I might have mentioned to Mom that you were going there to look for Daniel's gift, and she might have called this morning to ask how it went." Maya closed her eyes briefly. Their mother meant well, but she had a tendency to worry about Maya fitting in with Daniel's world. "And what did you tell her?" "That I hadn't heard from you about it yet." But then she started going on about how those places can be so stuck up, and how she hoped they treated her daughter with respect, and, well, I got the feeling something might have happened. Maya put down her knife and leaned against the counter. She'd tried to put the humiliating experience behind her, but apparently her sister knew her too well. "It wasn't a big deal," Maya said, aiming for a casual tone. "The sales guy was a bit of a jerk, so I left. End of story." "What did he do?" Lily pressed. He made it clear I wasn't the kind of customer they were looking for." Even saying it out loud brought back some of the shame Maya had felt. "He basically told me to go shop at a department store instead." "He did what?" Lily's voice rose in outrage. "Are you kidding me? Did you tell him who you were?" "No, and I wouldn't have anyway. That's not who I am, Lily. But you could have put that snob in his place. You could have bought the whole store if you wanted to." Maya smiled a little at her sister's indignation. "That's not the point. Besides, it's over now. I ordered something else and I haven't told Daniel about it. I don't want him to be upset over nothing." "It's not nothing, Maya, it's—" Lily stopped suddenly. "Wait, you say you haven't told Daniel?" "No, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't either. His birthday is this weekend and I don't want anything to spoil it." "Right, of course," Lily agreed, a bit too quickly. "My lips are sealed." Maya narrowed her eyes at her sister's sudden compliance. "Lily, I mean it. Don't say anything." "I won't." "Geez, Maya, give me some credit." They chatted a bit longer about their parents and Lily's job before hanging up. Maya returned to her dinner preparations, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her sister was hiding something. Little did Maya know that across town, Daniel was already aware of what had happened at Bellamy's, though not from Lily. He'd found, out entirely by accident. Daniel had been working from home that morning, taking video calls in his office while Maya was out running errands. Between meetings, he'd decided to make a cup of coffee and had overheard Maya on the phone in the kitchen. She'd returned early and was talking to someone, presumably her sister, in a hushed voice. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but when he heard Maya say, "He basically told me to go shop at a department store instead," in a hurt tone he rarely heard from his usually confident wife, Daniel had paused in the hallway. "No, and I wouldn't have. Anyway, that's not who I am, Lily," he'd heard her say next. And then, "Besides, it's over now. I ordered something else and I haven't told Daniel about it. I don't want him to be upset over nothing." Daniel had quietly returned to his office, his coffee forgotten. Something had upset Maya and she didn't want him to know about it. That wasn't like her at all. Later that afternoon, while Maya was taking a nap, Daniel had called Lily himself. It hadn't taken much to get the full story out of her. Lily had always had a soft spot for her brother-in-law, and she was still fuming about how her sister had been treated. Now, as Daniel wrapped up his last meeting of the day, he was formulating a plan. He ended the call and checked his watch, the same reliable timepiece he'd worn for years. It wasn't fancy, but it had been a gift from his grandfather when he'd graduated from college. To Daniel, its value had nothing to do with its price tag. He found Maya in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred something that smelled delicious. "Hey," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind and kissing the top of her head. "How about lunch downtown tomorrow? Just the two of us." Maya leaned back against him. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. I just have a meeting nearby in the morning, and I thought it would be nice to meet up afterward." This was true. He did have a morning meeting. He just didn't mention that he'd specifically scheduled it near the downtown shopping district where Bellamy's was located. "That sounds lovely," Maya said, turning to give him a proper kiss. "Where should we go?" "I was thinking that new place. On 4th Street? The one with the patio overlooking the park?" Maya smiled. "Perfect." The next day dawned bright and clear. Maya wore a simple sundress with a light cardigan, one of Daniel's favorites on her, and met him outside the restaurant. At noon, they enjoyed a leisurely lunch, talking about everything and nothing as they often did. Daniel loved these moments with Maya, when the outside world with all its pressures and expectations seemed to fade away. "I need to stop by the bank before we head home," Daniel said casually as they left the restaurant. "It's just a couple of blocks from here." Maya linked her arm through his as they strolled down the street. It was a beautiful day for a walk, with just enough breeze to keep the temperature comfortable. As they turned onto the next block, Maya suddenly stiffened beside him. Daniel felt it immediately, but pretended not to notice as they approached the gleaming storefront of Bellamy's fine jewelry and watches. "Actually," Daniel said, stopping in front of the store, "would you mind if we pop in here for a minute? I've been meaning to get my watch serviced." Maya's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, we could go somewhere else. I'm sure there are other places that could help with your watch." Daniel gave her a puzzled look. "This place has great reviews. It'll just take a minute, I promise." Before she could object further, he gently guided her toward the door, his hand, warm and reassuring against the small of her back. The store was just as Maya remembered it, all gleaming glass and subtle lighting. There were a few customers browsing the displays, all of them dressed in clothes that probably cost more than Maya's entire wardrobe. And there, behind the same counter as before, was Philip. He looked up as they entered, his professional smile freezing for just a moment when he spotted Maya. Then his gaze shifted to Daniel, and recognition dawned in his eyes. Unlike Maya, Daniel Way's face occasionally appeared in business magazines and tech industry news. His latest round of funding had made headlines just last month. Philip hurried out from behind the counter, his smile now wide and genuine. "Mr. Way, what an unexpected pleasure. Welcome to Bellamy's." Daniel gave the manager a polite nod. "Thank you." I'm just here to inquire about watch servicing. Of course, Philip gushed. Though if I may say, a man of your stature might consider an upgrade rather than servicing that particular timepiece. He eyed Daniel's modest watch with barely concealed disdain. Perhaps, Daniel said mildly. Then, as if just remembering, he added, "Oh, this is my wife, Maya." Philip's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second as he turned to Maya. "Ah, yes. I believe we met briefly the other day. How lovely to see you again, Mrs. Wei." The emphasis he placed on Mrs. Wei was subtle but unmistakable. Maya forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Unfortunately, I have some important clients waiting," Philip continued smoothly, gesturing toward a couple examining diamond rings. "But I'd be happy to have Thomas assist you." He signaled to a younger associate nearby. "Thomas, please take excellent care of Mr. Wei and his wife." Daniel held up a hand. "Actually, I was hoping to speak with you specifically, Mr. Harrington." Philip Harrington, store manager. Philip's chest puffed up slightly with importance. "Mr. Harrington." "Perfect." Daniel's smile was pleasant, but there was something in his eyes that made Philip shift uncomfortably. "I understand you helped my wife a few days ago when she came in looking for a birthday gift for me." The color drained slowly from Philip's face as he looked between Daniel and Maya, suddenly connecting the dots. Yes, I believe I did have a brief conversation with Mrs. Wei." The silence that fell over Bellamy's fine jewelry and watches was so complete you could have heard a diamond drop on the plush carpet. Other customers paused their browsing to watch the unfolding scene, sensing the tension in the air. Philip Harrington's professional mask was slipping by the second. "Mr. Wei, I assure you that I treat all our potential customers with the utmost respect and—" "Potential customers?" Daniel interrupted, his voice still calm but with a new edge to it. "That's an interesting choice of words. What exactly makes someone a potential customer rather than just a customer in your view, Mr. Harrington?" Maya touched Daniel's arm, gently. "Daniel, it's really not important, we can just go." But Daniel wasn't ready to leave. His eyes stayed fixed on Philip, waiting for an answer. Philip glanced nervously around at the other customers who were now openly watching. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation in my office, Mr. Wei." "I'm comfortable right here," Daniel replied. "My wife came in a few days ago looking for a birthday gift for me. I'd like to know exactly how you helped her." Philip's forehead had developed a light sheen of sweat. "I simply offered Mrs. Wei some guidance about our selection. Our pieces are quite exclusive, and I wanted to ensure she understood the investment value of—" "She asked to see a watch," Daniel cut in. "Did you show it to her?" The store manager cleared his throat. "I suggested that perhaps she might find something more suitable elsewhere." "More suitable?" Daniel's eyebrows rose. "What made you decide what was suitable for my wife?" By now, every person in the store was watching the exchange. The young associate named Thomas had backed away, pretending to straighten a display while clearly listening to every word. Even the security guard by the door seemed to be holding his breath. "Mr. Wei, please understand, we deal with a very specific clientele here. When someone comes in dressed, that is to say, when someone appears to be outside our typical demographic, we have a responsibility to—" "To what?" Daniel asked, his voice dropping so low that people leaned in to hear. "To judge them by their appearance? To decide what they can afford based on what they're wearing?" Philip's face had turned an uncomfortable shade of red. "We were simply busy that day, and I had to prioritize serious buyers." Maya, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. "You weren't busy. There were 2 other sales associates free, but no one would help me for 10 minutes, and when I finally asked to see the watch, you told me I should go to a department store." A woman nearby gasped softly. Daniel turned to Maya with a gentle look. "Which watch was it? Show me." Maya hesitated, then walked over to the display case, where she'd stood 3 days earlier. "That one," she said, pointing to the watch with the brown leather strap. I thought you might like it because it's special without being flashy. It reminded me of you. Daniel looked at the watch, then at Philip. Please take it out so I can see it. Philip fumbled with his keys, his hands trembling slightly as he unlocked the case and carefully removed the watch. He placed it on a velvet pad on the counter. Daniel examined it thoughtfully. It was indeed exactly his style. Elegant but understated, the kind of piece that spoke of quality rather than showing off. He could see why Maya had chosen it. How much is it? Daniel asked, though he could see the small, discreet price tag. Philip swallowed hard. $62,000, sir. Daniel nodded and turned to Maya. Do you like it? Do you think it would be a good gift? I do, she said softly. But Daniel, you don't have to do this. I know I don't have to. He smiled at her, a private smile that made the rest of the world disappear for a moment. Then he turned back to Philip. Mr. Harrington, I could buy this watch right now. In fact, I could buy every watch in this store without making a dent in my bank account. His voice remained conversational, but there was steel beneath the words. But that's not the point, is it? Philip looked confused. I'm not sure I understand, sir. The point is that when my wife came in here, you didn't see her as a person deserving of basic respect. You saw her clothes, her simple purse, her lack of designer labels, and you decided she didn't belong. The store had gone so quiet you could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning. Mr. Wei, please, if I've caused any offense. You haven't offended me, Mr. Harrington. You've disappointed me. Daniel looked around the store, taking in the watching customers. I've been in business for 15 years. Do you know what I've learned in that time? Philip shook his head mutely. I've learned that the person who walks in wearing jeans and a t-shirt might be the one who can buy your company 10 times over. I've learned that true wealth doesn't need to announce itself with logos and brand names. And I've learned that how you treat people when you think they can't do anything for you reveals your true character. An older gentleman in the corner nodded in quiet approval. I was actually planning to purchase the building that houses this store, Daniel continued. The Way Foundation, my wife's passion project, needs a new headquarters, and this location would have been perfect. Philip's eyes widened in horror. Mr. Way, please, I had no idea. Daniel held up a hand to stop him. But now I'm not sure I want my wife's foundation, which focuses on giving educational opportunities to underprivileged youth, to be housed in a place where people are judged by their appearance rather than their character. The color drained from Philip's face. Sir, I can assure you that what happened was an isolated incident. It doesn't reflect our company values at all. Doesn't it? Daniel asked quietly. I wonder what your other employees would say if I asked them. I wonder what the owner would say if I shared this story with him. At the mention of the owner, Philip seemed to physically shrink. Mr. Wei, please, is the owner here today? Daniel asked. No, sir. Mr. Bellamy is rarely on site. He owns several stores throughout the country. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. I see. Well, I'd like to speak with him. Could you call him, please? Philip looked as if he might faint. Call him? Right now? Right now, Daniel confirmed. If this truly doesn't reflect your company's values, I'm sure he'd want to know about it immediately. The store manager fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking as he scrolled through his contacts. He stepped a few feet away to make the call, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. While they waited, Daniel turned to Maya. I'm sorry I didn't tell you I knew. I just couldn't stand the thought of anyone treating you that way. Maya squeezed his hand. You didn't have to do all this. It really wasn't that important. It is important, Daniel insisted gently. Not because of the money or the watch or any of that, but because you deserve to be treated with dignity no matter what you're wearing or where you come from. Everyone does. After what seemed like an eternity, Philip returned, looking pale. Mr. Bellamy would like to speak with you, sir. He held out his phone with a trembling hand. Daniel took the phone. Mr. Bellamy? Daniel Wei here. He listened for a moment. Yes, that's correct. I'm here with my wife, who had a rather unpleasant experience at your store recently. Another pause. I appreciate that. Yes, I think that would be for the best. He listened again, nodding. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. would work fine. My office. I'll have my assistant send the address, thank you. He handed the phone back to Philip, whose expression was a mixture of dread and confusion. Mr. Bellamy will be flying in tomorrow to meet with me, Daniel explained, his voice loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. He'd like to personally apologize to my wife and discuss how to ensure this kind of incident never happens again. Philip looked as if he might collapse. I see. Also mentioned something about reviewing the management structure of this particular location, Daniel added. But I'm sure he'll discuss that with you directly. Maya tugged gently at Daniel's sleeve. I think we should go now, she whispered. Daniel nodded, then turned back to Philip one last time. You know, the irony is that my wife grew up working in customer service. She was a barista putting herself through community college when we met. She knows what it's like to be on your side of the counter, which is why she would never treat anyone the way you treated her. He took Maya's hand and headed for the door. As they reached it, Daniel paused and looked back at the watch still sitting on the counter. And for the record, he called back, that watch is exactly what I would have chosen for myself. My wife knows me better than anyone. You missed out on a sale because you couldn't see past your own prejudice. With that, Daniel held the door for Maya, and they stepped back out into the sunshine, leaving behind a store full of shocked customers and one very shaken manager. As they walked down the sidewalk hand in hand, Maya finally let out a breath. She felt like she'd been holding for days. Daniel Way, she said, her voice a mixture of amazement and amusement. You are full of surprises. Daniel smiled and squeezed her hand. Did I go too far? I just kept thinking about how hurt you must have been, and I couldn't let it go. You didn't go too far, Maya assured him, though I think poor Philip might need a change of pants. They both laughed, the tension of the confrontation melting away. So what happens now? Maya asked as they reached their car. Are you really going to meet with the owner tomorrow? Daniel opened her door for her. I am, but not for the reason everyone in that store thinks. Maya gave him a curious look. What do you mean? Daniel smiled mysteriously. Let's just say I have an idea that might turn this whole situation into something positive. 6 months later, Maya stood in front of the large glass windows of what used to be Bellamy's fine jewelry and watches. The gleaming storefront now bore a different name, Second Chances Community Center. Inside, people bustled about, setting up displays and arranging furniture. Some were hanging artwork on the walls while others assembled clothing racks. Through the windows, Maya could see a young woman practicing a presentation in front of a mirror dressed in a crisp new business suit. Nervous? Daniel asked, coming up beside her and handing her a cup of coffee. Maya took the coffee with a grateful smile. A little. I've never given a speech to so many people before. You'll be amazing, Daniel assured her, putting an arm around her shoulders. This was all your idea, after all. Maya leaned into him, thinking back to that day 6 months ago when they'd left Bellamy's and she'd asked about his mysterious plan. On the drive home that day, Daniel had finally explained. I'm still going to buy the building, he'd told her, but not for the foundation's headquarters. Then for what? Maya had asked, confused. Daniel had glanced over at her with a smile. That's up to you. I'm just providing the space. You're going to decide what goes in it. It had taken Maya only 2 days to come up with her answer, and when she'd shared her idea with Daniel, the look of pride on his face had been worth everything. Now, as they stood looking at the transformed space, Maya could hardly believe how quickly it had all come together. The door opened, and a tall man with salt and pepper hair stepped out. There you are. We're all ready for you inside, Mrs. Way. Thank you, Mr. Bellamy, Maya replied with a smile. And please, it's just Maya. Victor Bellamy, former owner of the jewelry store, and now an enthusiastic board member of the Second Chances Initiative, held the door for them. The press is already here and we've got a full house. Your sister just arrived too. Inside, the former luxury boutique had been transformed. Where gleaming display cases once held watches worth more than most people's yearly salaries, there were now stations for resume preparation and job interview practice. The private rooms where wealthy customers had once tried on jewelry in hushed tones now served as spaces for career counseling and skills training. Lily rushed over as soon as she spotted Maya, engulfing her sister in a hug. "This place looks incredible. I can't believe this all started because some snooty guy was rude to you." Maya laughed. "Well, it was a bit more complicated than that." "Not really," Lily insisted. "You got kicked out of a fancy store and now that store is gone and in its place is something actually useful to society. I call that poetic justice." Daniel shook his head, amused by his sister-in-law's characterization of events. "It wasn't about justice, Lily. It was about creating something positive from a negative experience." The truth was more nuanced than either explanation. After their confrontation at Bellamy's, Daniel had indeed met with Victor Bellamy the next day. But instead of demanding apologies or threatening to buy the building out from under him, Daniel had shared a vision. Maya's vision. The jewelry store would close, yes, but the employees wouldn't lose their jobs. Instead, they would help create something new. A center where people who needed a second chance could learn how to present themselves professionally, practice interview skills, and receive career mentoring. It would provide business attire for job seekers who couldn't afford it, offer computer access for those without it, and provide a space where people wouldn't be judged by their appearance or background. To everyone's surprise, Victor Bellamy had loved the idea. His father had started their jewelry business with a loan from a stranger who believed in him when banks wouldn't, and Victor had never forgotten that lesson about second chances. He'd been deeply ashamed of how Maya had been treated in his store, and saw this as an opportunity to return to his family's roots of helping others succeed. Even Philip Harrington had been given a choice: leave with a generous severance package, or stay and help build the new center. To Maya's surprise, he'd chosen to stay. Now he taught classes on professional etiquette and customer service, sharing his extensive knowledge of how to make people feel valued. His first lesson always included his own story of misjudging Maya, a cautionary tale he told with genuine remorse. "There she is," a voice called out, breaking into Maya's thoughts. She turned to see Angela, a recent graduate of their program, approaching with a wide smile. 3 months ago, Angela had come to them homeless after losing her job and apartment. Now she was dressed in a smart business suit, her confidence visibly transformed. "I got the job," Angela announced, her eyes shining with tears. "The paralegal position at that law firm. They just called this morning." Maya hugged her tightly. "I knew you would. They'd be crazy not to hire you." "I wouldn't have even applied without your encouragement," Angela said, "and definitely wouldn't have had the right clothes for the interview." She smoothed down her jacket, a donation from one of their corporate sponsors. "The clothes just helped. You look the part," Maya told her firmly. "You got the job because you're qualified and worked incredibly hard." A young man approached with a clipboard. "Mrs. Wei, we're ready to begin the ceremony whenever you are." Maya nodded, suddenly feeling butterflies in her stomach again. Today marked the official grand opening of Second Chances, though they'd been operating on a limited basis for the past 2 months. There would be speeches, a ribbon cutting, and press coverage, all things that the old Maya from Pine Harbor would have run from. But this was too important to let her nerves get in the way. Daniel gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You've got this." She took a deep breath and followed the young man to the small stage that had been set up at the back of the room. The crowd quieted as she approached the microphone. Among the faces, Maya recognized former Bellamy's employees, program participants, donors, and even a few people from Pine Harbor who had made the trip to support her, including her parents, who beamed with pride from the front row. "Thank you all for coming today," Maya began, her voice growing stronger with each word. 6 months ago, I walked into this building and was judged solely on my appearance. I was told, in not so many words, that I didn't belong here. A murmur ran through the crowd. "At first I was hurt and embarrassed," Maya continued. "But then, I realized something important. That experience wasn't unique to me. Every day people are judged based on what they wear, how they speak, or where they come from. And those judgments can close doors that should remain open." She gestured around the transformed space. "That's why second chances exist. Not as revenge for how I was treated, but as a response to how too many people are treated every day. Our mission is simple: to help people walk through doors that might otherwise be closed to them. Maya went on to explain the center's programs, and to thank the many people who had made it possible, including Victor Bellamy, who stood to enthusiastic applause when she acknowledged his crucial support. Most of all, Maya said, looking directly at Daniel, I want to thank my husband not just for providing the space and resources for this center, but for believing that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of what they're wearing or how much money they have in their pocket. As the applause died down, Maya introduced Angela and several other program graduates who each shared their stories briefly. Their testimonials brought tears to many eyes in the audience, including Maya's own. After the speeches, as Maya cut the ceremonial ribbon across the front door, cameras flashed and applause erupted. Reporters called out questions, and Maya answered them with a confidence she would never have possessed a year ago. Later, as the crowd mingled and enjoyed refreshments, Maya found herself standing with Daniel near the spot where Philip Harrington had once dismissed her. Did you ever imagine this would come from that day? Daniel asked quietly. Maya shook her head. Never, I just wanted to buy you a watch. She laughed softly. Speaking of which, I never did get you a birthday present. Daniel smiled and held up his wrist, showing the same reliable watch he'd always worn. I don't need anything fancy. Besides, you gave me something much better than a watch. What's that? Maya asked. The reminder of why I fell in love with you in the first place, he said simply. Your heart. The way you took something hurtful and turned it into something helpful. The way you saw the best in people, even in Philip, when they didn't see the best in you. Maya felt her cheeks warm at his words. Even after years together, Daniel still had a way of making her heart skip a beat. Across the room, she saw Philip showing a young man how to tie a perfect Windsor knot, his manner patient and encouraging. Victor Bellamy was deep in conversation with Maya's father about expanding the program to Pine Harbor. Lily was helping Angela adjust her new business cards in their holder. You know what's funny? Maya said, turning back to Daniel. If Philip had just shown me that watch that day, none of this would have happened. Second chances wouldn't exist. Daniel considered this, then shook his head. I think you would have found a way to make something like this happen eventually. It's who you are, Maya. You've always seen value in people that others miss. You did it with me back when I was just a guy in a coffee shop. The best guy in the coffee shop, Maya corrected with a smile. As they looked around at the bustling center, at lives being changed and doors being opened, Maya felt a deep sense of contentment. The woman who'd been kicked out of a luxury boutique had indeed found a way to belong there after all, by transforming it into a place where everyone belonged. And that, Maya thought, as she leaned against her husband's shoulder, was worth far more than any watch could ever be.